I've been using the Zebra device for probably about 6 months now, really dozens and dozens of cases, spanning both the 6 French device and the 7 French guide catheter, both radial and femoral. It's kind of become my go-to across a broad swath of cases, using it in hemorrhagic cases, aneurysms, AVMs, extracranial cases, and thrombectomies as well. The number one thing that made me interested in using Zebra to begin with was that it was really novel in providing a large inner diameter and a lot of space to work with for still being able to go through a radial sheath. And so, especially the 7 French Zebra was what caught my attention as being the first catheter that would be able to go through a 7 French sheath, but still not compromise on the inner diameter necessary to do thrombectomy procedures. And then from there, it just really opened up. I started to notice that it was highly trackable in its 6 French version in the intracranial venous space, and really it's trackable when it needs to be, it's supportive in all the right places, and then finally, it's a two-way player. It can be used radially and femorally. It can switch back and forth as necessary without any difficulties. In terms of benefiting patients, probably the number one way in which using Zebra has benefited my patients has been opening up a segment of the population in which I can do a radial thrombectomy when I would have otherwise had to go femoral, especially in patients that there's real downsides to going femoral, such as getting thrombolytics right prior to my thrombectomy procedure. So just this past week, there was a patient with a smaller radial artery in which it would have been under my threshold to do a sheathless technique for an 088 guide catheter, but I felt confident putting in a sheath. And by doing that, I was able to do a very swift radial thrombectomy procedure, keeping that as a safer procedure in my hands for the patient. Our center at the University of Pennsylvania, led by my partner Jan Burkhardt, as well as several of the other centers who have had an early experience with Zebra, we all collaborated on a multi-center series discussing the various use cases and effectiveness of using the Zebra guide catheters, both 6 and 7 French. And in all cases, it was able to reach the target vessel. A few conversions from radial to femoral based on patient anatomy, but not really a limitation of the catheter itself, and no complications related to the device. So really, it proved for us what our anecdotal experience was, which was we were very satisfied with using the catheter to get what we needed, where we needed to go. And honestly, since we started collecting the data, our use has really accelerated even more. So I think for my personal experience, particularly using it in the venous system, since initially putting that data set together, it's accelerated greatly. So there's a lot more where that came from. In terms of translating experience with other catheters and then where are the unique qualities of Zebra kind of manifested, for the 6 French device, I think it's comparable and then one step beyond what I think a lot of people's favorite 6 French guide catheter might be, such as the Benchmark. Provides you more space on the inside of it. It's able to track a little bit more distally despite being larger on the inner diameter, and I think that it has greater stability, especially on the low end compared to Benchmark. So kind of where your kind of favorite catheter in that space, and then it adds a little bit more on top. And for the 7 French device, in some ways, like I said, for the thrombectomy cases, there's almost no peer, in which it's really opening up a completely different market where these patients would not have had a radial thrombectomy procedure in my hands. But compared to the other radial-specific catheters that might be applicable for thrombectomy, then all of a sudden this is providing something that can go through a sheath a lot more safely, and it'll feel actually a little bit more supple in your hands rather than jamming a larger guide catheter with the same inner diameter, but it still provides a lot of low-end support. So all the kind of hemorrhagic cases where you might want a lot of space, a lot of support, provides all of that. The learning curve for Zebra has really been quite favorable in my hands, but I have 3 fellows that I'm training, and my fellows that just graduated had a lot of experience with Zebra as well, and are going to start to use it in their practices as they go out and practice. And I think the learning curve is actually pretty straightforward. The real learning curve to me has been deciding when I need 7 French and when I need 6 French. And so while I really felt like I was almost greedy and wanting all of that space, I was able to go through a 7 French catheter, 7 French compatible catheter initially, I find myself gravitating to 6 French, which is really a star in its own right. And so there's a little bit of learning curve in terms of deciding where do you need that much size and support. But for the most part, actually using the catheter in your hands, it starts to do things, and you start to push the limits of where you can take the catheter, and learning what can fit inside once you have an extra few 0.003 of an inch or more space. You start to understand the different applications of it. But in my hands, the first time I used it in the venous system, it tracked immediately to the torcula, and I didn't even need to try that hard. First time I used it on a thrombectomy, it tracked all the way to the high cervical ICA. I left it there and I forgot about it till the case was done. In terms of, you don't need a ton of experience. If you are a radialist, it'll work as a radialist. If you are a femoral first kind of a person, it'll work for you as well. So that's what I mean. It's a two-way player without a lot of learning curve. Access is being closer and closer to being perfected. Now we just have to kind of perfect a few other things in the neurovascular space, but the devices are getting better and better, and access is no longer something that people have to think about or worry about. I often say that the best thing I can say about a guide catheter is I forgot it was there. And Zebra gets me very, very close to saying that for most cases. Certainly the closest for any other guide catheter that I've used in my practice thus far. So I'm very happy with where that progress has been. And specifically, I think the next couple things are going to be, what can you do with all of this space that Zebra has given? So what can you do when you have a 7 French catheter in the wrist, an 0.88 inner diameter? How can you optimize everything else to work around Zebra? And so I think Zebra brings it closer than ever to a guide catheter that you can take up and forget about the rest of the case. Now we're just working on the margins of what can be compatible with the rest of the ecosystem.